If I feel like my stomach's empty and it's been a long time since I had a meal, I'll just immediately start with a gel.
It's really easy for people that get into that overtrained state to want to push through, to feel like I need to push through because like if I take time off, I'm going to lose progress.
Should we talk about his little side question of the warning signs of overtraining?
Oh, yeah. Okay, first question this week is from Adam from Massachusetts. He's talking about pre-ride snacks. What is the best post-work snack before weekday intervals? So he's talking specifically for interval rides here, but I think it can be generally applied. He says, 1, to have at the house and slam right before putting on your bibs, not opposed to cooking batches on the weekends. 2, stopping at a grocery store right before the end of the workday, 1 or 1.5 hours until but on saddle time. He says, I'm in my early 30s. I'm a dude, 220 pounds, gives all of his stuff. Driving between properties, doing manual labor and walking a lot during the day. He's an arborist. That's cool. I will get a headache if I go straight to intervals without a snack, and that will screw up my recovery. But I also don't want to eat too much extra. Try to eat somewhat lean during the day, veggies and protein for a grocery store stop. Love y'all. Thanks, Adam.
Love y'all.
So I think there's a couple things to keep in mind here. You know, I think potentially
honey buns. Just honey buns. Before Dylan just goes on his, whatever he's about to say. Honey buns.
Right.
I'm just kidding. You can continue.
So you could be tempted to just consume something that's like really simple and high carb. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing to consume, but you might want to take into account the fact that there would be a blood glucose spike and then, subsequent insulin spike as well. If you do that, and then you get a blood glucose crash, and what you really don't want to do is time it poorly enough that you're in a blood glucose crash when you're starting your ride, when you need to be doing your intervals. So like, the worst that you could possibly time it would be if you were like, oh, I need some sugar right now before I start my ride. And then you like down a soda, and then you take 45 minutes to get ready, and then you start your ride. You're probably starting your ride in the blood glucose crash if you do that. Which is not good.
I literally did this yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, you probably
accidentally,
yeah, like you'll probably feel worse. You'll probably feel worse than if you had just not consumed anything.
Yeah.
So I mean, what you can do to avoid that is, if you can eat an hour and a half before the ride, that's better. And then I would also say that if you can consume something that is a little slower to digest, so something high carb but that has fiber and protein attached to it, then you probably won't get this dramatic spike and crash, and you'll probably feel better on your ride, and you'll have carbs right there in your system ready for when you're riding.
So what would an example of that be for you?
Yeah, I mean, what I do in the morning is I'll eat a bowl of oatmeal with fruit and peanut butter, and that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because it's high carb, but it's also high fiber, and it's got protein, and it's slower to digest, and all of that. And then, maybe I'll ride like an hour and a half or 2 hours later.
Yep. Yeah. So I think a snack like that like he talked about, he's open-minded to preparing stuff on the weekend. So he's got some grab and go food during the week. My wife makes these like peanut butter balls where they've got like some like dark chocolate chips. They've got peanut butter. It's got coconut, oatmeal. It's got flaxseed. I don't know. She's not a big fan of coconut flavors, but you could put some like coconut shavings in there if you wanted.
Yeah, we do.
Trying to think if there's any. Oh yeah, and then maple syrup, and that's what kind of like keeps it all stuck together. Yeah. They're super good. You can eat like I usually like 2 at a time. Probably 250, 300 calories between the two of them. But that'd be like exactly, I think that would fall right in line with what you're talking about. Like it's enough of a little snack, but it's not a meal, so that's something that like I would do like an hour and a half before.
PB&J. I mean, like
Yeah,
the simplest thing I could think of is like a PB&J.
Well, yeah. So, but you wouldn't want to do like on white bread. You'd want to do that on
Yeah.
like whole wheat or grain
Right, a little
bread.
bit slower to
Yeah.
digest. Yeah.
Maybe even skip the jelly. Like if you just put peanut butter
Yeah.
toast,
Peanut butter and yeah.
maybe
That's
a
what I was
banana.
thinking. So we're talking hour and a half before, or probably you're saying an hour and a half is probably ideal because then you get enough time to. Well,
Yeah.
I guess if it's a slower digesting one, but yeah, hour and a half. But then as far as the ones like he said right before putting on the bibs, like I feel like mine and everybody else's go-to is a banana. I don't know if that's just me.
Banana, yeah, banana's good.
My go-to is just grab a banana. Banana just seems like the easiest. It's like basically already digested because of how smushy it already is. So like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like the easiest thing to digest.
I mean, I also do think that like you could either go the route of let me try to eat something more substantial an hour and a half before, or you could say let me try to eat something that's very quick to digest immediately before. You could have a banana, or sometimes what I do is like I will hop on the bike, and within 5 minutes of starting the ride, if I feel like my stomach's empty and it's been a long time since I had a meal, I'll just immediately start with a gel.
Yeah.
Like I'll start the ride with a gel, even though I haven't burned enough calories to need the gel yet.
Right.
It's just been a while since I've had a meal, so I'll immediately start the ride with the gel.
Yeah, so like that's what yesterday I said. I accidentally started my ride in a sugar crash, but a lot of times what I'll do like is kind of the same thing, except I'll do it like 5 or 10 minutes before my ride. I'll just like down a package of like chews. And like yesterday, then I got a work call, of course, and then I had to like cater to some stuff. So like I didn't get to start my ride till 45 minutes after I ate those, which was the worst case scenario. But like I usually I basically just like if I'm within 15 or 20 minutes of starting my ride, it's not going to be a long enough time for my body to like really digest it. I just reach for whatever ride fuel. And I think bananas can fall into that. Like a lot of people will bring a banana even on rides, right? But think of like something like that's more ride fuel. If you're doing weekend prep kind of stuff, you could do like rice cakes, that would fall into that. If you want something that's kind of like more whole food. But I like to think of that like within 30 minutes of starting your ride, like that is ride fuel time.
Are we going to give him some advice on his midday lunch stop? He says veggies and protein. I think that could be improved a little, right?
Well,
veggies and protein are good, but
when he says veggies and protein, I guess like are we talking about like a salad and chicken? Or are we talking I guess the biggest probably what you're hinting at is there some sort of carbohydrate in there or not?
I mean, he admits that it's somewhat lean. So if you're admitting it's somewhat lean, you probably need to bulk it up a little bit. And I would say bulk it up with carbs.
Yeah, especially on those interval days.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
Like if I couldn't imagine just eating a salad before I go smash intervals. Salad is healthy, but it doesn't that's not fuel for intervals for sure. Like that's I'd say that's a bad meal for intervals.
And
that's a terrible meal for intervals. Like it's not giving you anything you need to do intervals.
Well, and I'll say too that like if you have a pretty hearty lunch that's like got rice and veggies and protein, and you're not full after that, but you're like satisfied, you could probably get away with not consuming anything else for another 3 hours before you start your ride. And you'd be fine. And then maybe you hit a gel right when you start your ride. But other than that, you probably don't even need to concern yourself with this like pre-ride snack that you're talking about.
If he had said my lunch was rice, veggies, and protein, I'd be like, oh yeah, nothing wrong with that. But because it just says veggies and protein, I'm like, throw some rice in there, something, pasta, something.
Yeah, I think another option could be to do like a little bit more snacking too. Like he talks about how he's got these like drives between properties and doing his manual labor. Like it could be appropriate to just like have a mid-afternoon snack. So like instead of waiting till after work to do that snack, still try and time it to where then you can get a little bit more wholesome snack in. And that could be like your peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something like a little bit more filling like that. But do that 3 hours before your ride. So like maybe you're eating lunch at noon, but you're not riding till 6. Like that's a pretty big gap. So if you split that in half, instead of waiting till 5 p.m. to eat something, try and eat something at 3 o'clock, like mid-afternoon time frame. And that could be easy. Like that could be again meal prep kind of stuff where you just have it ready to go in your car So you hop in your car at some point, or maybe you take a 5-minute break, during some of your manual labor stuff. Obviously you don't want to eat something that's going to like upset your stomach or detract from like the work that you need to get done. Like if you're doing hard work, like, you don't want to eat something that's too filling and that's going to bog you down. But that could be another option too, because to go from noon to 6, like that's a pretty big gap, and I can see why you would need to fill that. But ideally, I think you'd be better off filling that a couple hours before. Cool. Oh yeah, one more thing too. I think like he doesn't mention, but assuming that since these are after work workouts, they're probably on the shorter end. Call it anywhere from an hour to 2 hours tops, I would think. Don't feel like that short duration of a workout doesn't still need proper fueling. So if you're doing an hour-long interval session, like you should still make sure you're fueling that during the ride even. Don't just go in there with water and maybe some electrolytes. Like you could add some carbs on top of that, even though it's only an hour, especially if you're having these days where you're kind of like carb depleted coming into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had a good conversation about that with an athlete I coach who's, he like wants to lose weight from racing and training as well. But I told him like, even on interval days, even if it is 60 to 90 minutes, you hear people all the time say like, oh, technically, well, you got 90 minutes of stored glycogen in your muscles to get you through 90 minutes. But just because that's true doesn't mean that that's optimal. Like doing what's best for those intervals would be to also take in carbs. And then that's not only going to like probably improve your intervals during the workout, it's going to definitely improve your recovery after the workout, because then you'll get to the end of that interval session a little less glycogen depleted, and a little bit ahead on recovery versus if you just drank water on that interval session. Like you might be able to get through the intervals off of just water, but then you're going to be pretty depleted by the end of that workout.
Yeah, and that's a big mistake that people do make when they are trying to do some kind of like weight loss or body composition optimization, is they underfuel their workouts and then they're just starving afterwards. And then they just go and like raid the entire kitchen. And it's like you just ate way more calories.
Right.
Doing that than taking in a few more calories on the bike, getting a proper session in, and then not feeling that post-ride craving.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Let's move on here to this next one here. This is from Patrick from Oregon. Hi again, folks. As I was listening on my way home from work yesterday and sort of zeroed in on Dylan's return from injury, Dizzle talking about adjusting power way down for a particular workout. Could you speak to coming back after injury or after a significant drop in fitness? Everyone has peaks and valleys. Timing can be tricky. This spring, I was flying after a winter of weights and instigating my sauna program. I was sick. I felt amazing and was seeing the highest numbers ever. My A race still a month off. I felt like I could take it another step up, but alas, all at once, my legs started to hurt on my rise. My power dropped way off, and no amount of rest seemed to bring back that endurance and freshness. I overcooked it too early in the season. I should have seen those warning signs. And then he asks, what are some of those warning signs? What are your suggestions and strategies for returning to form? Mentality must be a big one. I can imagine it takes a lot of patience and confidence for Dylan to work back into it and know how much work there is to do. Congrats, Dizzle, on the Rift result, and very interesting on the VO2 max testing numbers. How much do you think heat/sauna contributed? So that was like a separate question to talk about. And then he says, cheers, Patrick, aka the sauna guy.
Nice. Bunch of different questions in there.
I mean, that was like multiple questions. Because his specific, I know he's talking about like coming back into form after an injury or something, but his situation that he's describing is different. It sounds like he may have overtrained, and that's a lot different than I was sick or I was injured and now I need to get back into fitness, because actually being sick or injured is the exact opposite. Like you're undertrained severely versus being overtrained. Yeah,
so I don't know if maybe he got overtrained and then took a long time off, like because he just had to give his body some rest. He doesn't specify, but that's probably what I would assume here is like he, sometime in the spring, he just had to take time off the bike and maybe he's getting back into it now.
Yeah. Well, but look,
regardless, like let's talk about it from, because it seems like he wants to know, like, what does it look like? How do you approach returning to form after, significant time off for whatever reason?
Yeah. I mean, but the reason why I specify here is because I think it's actually very different.
Yeah.
And let me explain why. So if you find yourself overtrained, which a lot of people do, I mean, I feel like I've been overtrained at one point or another every single year of my life since I started training. So it's just how it is when you're an athlete. If you take time off, usually, so let's say you overtrain severely and then you take a week off, maybe even 2 weeks off. Probably the first week back is going to suck. You're going to feel like you lost all your fitness. You didn't. The return back is really quick. I remember, I think when I was maybe like 20 or 21 or something, I overtrained myself and I felt terrible for about a month. There was like a month period where didn't complete a single interval session, felt tired all the time, felt fatigued all the time. And I had a race, an important race coming up like right around the corner. We're talking about, it was like 2 weeks out. And I was like, if I continue like this, I'm going to perform terribly at the race. So I have to do something drastic. So I took 5 days off, got back on the bike and was like, oh man, this was a mistake. Like I still feel terrible. Within a week, I turned it around, felt amazing at the race, had some of my highest numbers I'd ever seen at that race. And I think I got like second or something, which was a good result for me. So if you are in the camp of you overtrained and you need to take some time off, you can turn that back around very quickly by taking some rest. You're not throwing half your season away. Unless you severely overtrained, like you can severely overtrain to the point where you need to take a lot of time off. But if you haven't gotten to that point, if it's just a little bit of overtraining, you'd be shocked at how quickly you can turn it. I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything to that before I go off on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that was a good, like an important distinction to make, because it's really easy, I think, and it's really easy for people that get into that overtrained state to want to push through, to feel like I need to push through because like if I take time off, I'm going to lose progress. But what you're pointing out here is it's actually the opposite. It's like I actually need to give my body the rest so that all these adaptations can kick in and I can have some like energy reserved for whether it's hard sessions or a race coming up. If you just try to push through, you're actually never going to capitalize on all those improvements that you potentially could have had. So that's important because people do think that like even in the off season, like, no one wants to ever take time off if they don't have to, right? But your body just needs time off at certain points. So I think that's important to make. So let's go on to like returning to form after like significant time off for another reason.
Well, I was going to say, since we're already on the topic of overtraining, should we talk about his little side question of the warning signs of overtraining?
Let's do that.
We can talk about that too.
Yeah, I figured since we're already on
good call.
topic of overtraining, the warning signs.
Well, give us some warning signs too.
Top of the list would be fatigue, right? I mean, and he kind of already laid it out here. Like, it's funny how people will say like, I felt terrible. My legs started to hurt on rides. My power dropped way off. I'm like, well, that's the sign. like that, he's like wondering what the signs are, but he had just listed off probably the biggest one is a lack in freshness, I guess is what you could maybe dial it down to. I always tell my athletes that I coach that the number one reason that I want them to be leaving comments on their rides, and especially their interval days or long rides, is because I think that the very first thing that you're going to start to notice when somebody starts to go down the road of overtraining is a lack of motivation or even a lack of enjoyment from riding. Like you start to see the subtle shift of like, these workouts are awesome and I'm crushing it and I feel good and I'm so pumped, to, oh, this was a long ride. Oh, these intervals really hurt. And you start to see that decline in maybe positivity or whatever you want to call that. But you start to notice that in the comments, I think, before. Like I would notice that in the comments far before I would notice it in some power or heart rate, especially for somebody else that I'm not as familiar with their power and their heart rate metrics. Like maybe I could notice a very subtle drop in my heart rate or whatever when I'm riding, but to do that for just on like on somebody's training peaks with a graph is basically like impossible. So the way that I look for the first red, sirens or warning signs of overtraining are the comments and training peaks.
Yeah. So your own motivation, if you're normally a highly motivated athlete, and not everybody is, so look, if you're just not a very motivated person, then this might not apply to you, because some people just don't have the motivation to exercise to begin with, and it's not because they're overtrained, it's just because
baseline motivation.
Well, I don't even want to. That seems like a little derogatory to even say that, but they've actually pinpointed genes that are responsible for people enjoying exercise or not enjoying exercise, and some people are unfortunate enough to not have this gene and not enjoy exercise, and then they are just not motivated to exercise. I would think that people listening to this podcast are probably motivated to exercise because they're listening to this podcast, right? So anyway, if you're normally very motivated to go train, pay attention to your motivation, because if you start to lose that motivation, it may not be because you have a weak will or whatever. It's actually, your motivation is a sign of how overtrained you are, and losing motivation is a symptom of overtraining. Other symptoms of overtraining could be changes to your sleep patterns, like you could either be sleeping way more than you normally are because you're so tired, or you could be sleeping less, or you could have changes in weight. You could be gaining weight, you could be losing weight.
Appetite,
yeah, you could lose your appetite. You could be wanting to eat more. I know this is very vague because it goes in both directions,
not one way or the other, right?
But we're
just talking about documenting changes, right?
Yeah, right. Everybody's different. And I think the thing to keep in mind too is that, during normal training, you shouldn't always feel amazing. Like if you had a hard workout the day before, you should feel tired the next day. But I would say that, in a 7-day training week, you should probably feel pretty good 2 or 3 of those days, right? Like you should feel, and hopefully those days where you feel pretty good align with your interval days and you smash your intervals, right? And then maybe the other days of the week you're a little tired because you just did some intervals or you just did a long ride, right? I think if you get to the point where you don't feel good any days of the week, like all 7 days you feel like crap, that's a sign that you might be overtrained too. And yeah, I if we're talking about signs, like I think I would pay close attention to motivation and the frequency with which you actually feel really good on the bike.
And just keep in mind too, a lot of people can have denial about overtraining because they look at their training plan and they look at Training Peaks and they see 7 hours a week. Like, how can I be overtrained on 7 hours? But it's cumulative from all stresses of life. So someone that leads a very stressful life in work or family or, other hobbies, like all of that can accumulate to an account or contribute towards like this overtrained state. So you got to kind of keep in mind the big picture too. It's not just the acute training that you need to look at.
Should we, I don't know if this was part of his question or not, but should we talk about coming back from a more significant time off due to like injury or illness?
Yeah, I think that's what he was mostly, it seemed like he was pretty interested in that. So, basically coming back after significant time off and almost like starting over in a sense.
Sure.
So I think, and actually we were going to do this question last week, but you ended up not coming on. So we pushed it this week because I think particularly wanted to kind of hear some of your journey back to kind of where you're at right now. And actually post Leadville is probably a great time for you to talk about it.
Yeah.
Where I know you didn't take necessarily a significant time off, but like you took enough time, especially during season, to where like it affected your season, right?
Yeah. So, I guess in my case in particular, I went a month without riding a bike, but when I started riding, it's not like I went straight back into training because my knee wouldn't allow me to actually properly train. So I would say it was like a month and a half before I could actually do what I would call training. Training is relative to everyone. I don't consider 5 hours a week training personally, because it's just so low that, I'm used to doing
You're 20... still detraining at that point for you.
Yeah, I'm used to doing 20 to 30 hours a week. So 5 hours a week is like, it might as well be 0, right?
Yeah.
And I know for some people, 5 hours a week is a lot. So it's all relative. But I would say I wasn't able to do what I would actually call training for a month and a half. And that's enough time to lose a lot of fitness. But I think the thing that you need to keep in mind is you're never starting over. I mean, no matter how much time you've taken off, if you have some history of training in your life, you're never starting from zero. I hear people say that sometimes, like, oh, I'm starting from zero. Like, I took a year off, I'm starting from zero. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from a much lower place than you were when you were well trained, but you're never going back to a state where you'd never trained before in your life. I mean, I think something that I think about is the first time I ever got in the gym, I was probably the most sore from a gym workout that I've ever been. Like, I could barely walk. I was so sore. And then every single year after that, when I go back into the gym for the first time, the soreness isn't as bad. And it's to the point now where the first time I get back in the gym, I will be sore, but it's not like it's actually like incredibly manageable at this point because I have a history of going to the gym every single year for the last 10 years. Same thing with cycling. So you're never starting from zero. Even if it feels like you are starting from zero. And then I think an important thing to keep in mind is that it was the case with me, like motivation is sky high when you haven't trained in a month and a half. Like you couldn't have more motivation to train. You would love nothing more, at least for me, I would love nothing more than to go smash a 30-hour week, even though my body can't handle that. So I think that it's actually, you really need to rein it in and realize the fitness that you're at and hold yourself back from overdoing it. And there were points where I felt like I was overdoing it, and I took 4 or 5 days easy and got back on it. And you just kind of need to readjust expectations. Interval power is going to have to be lower. Zone 2 power is going to have to be lower. Everything's going to have to be lower. But I think one thing that is motivating when you've taken that much time off is that you gain fitness back pretty quickly. Usually when you're training, you don't see fitness gains happen that fast. But if you've taken a lot of time off, your threshold power from 1 week to the next could go up by 40 watts.
Yeah.
So that can be motivating.
Yeah, I think a mistake people often make with the whole coming back after injury or after overtraining or whatever is like how short-sighted we seem to be. Like, I need to like get back to where I was as quick as possible, and then you end up totally smoked because you tried to do too much, because it's like whatever you're so focused on the first race that you're gonna do that you lose sight of like the bigger picture of, like, for example, if Dylan went like all in on Leadville, which I don't think you did, I think that would have been kind of short-sighted, and it might not have been good for the full picture. But I think that the way you approached it was, well, now that this, bad thing has happened to me, I'm going to readjust my goals. And now I'm going to give myself enough time to get back to race shape. And I'm going to focus on the late season races like Big Sugar and even Iceman. So it's like having not just being careful to not be too short-sighted, but rather take a step back and say, okay, how can I readjust my season to make it fit these circumstances that I didn't foresee, and making the best of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's probably a mistake people make too, is like they don't readjust their goals, which is probably the first thing you need to do. If something like that forces you to take time off the bike, you probably just have to have like a really disappointing check, like reality check of like, well, what I was training for might not be the top. Like, I might have to shift that.
Right. Yeah, and if you don't readjust those goals, then you're going to be tempted to also not like readjust your expectations in training, right? So that's kind of what goes in line here. So like, let's say when you got injured, or when you for whatever reason had this forced time off, your FTP was 300 watts. After 2 months off, you can't expect your FTP to be 300 watts still, right? Like, you have to let your expectations drop. So your training zones are going to drop. But if you're trying to get back into shape for an A race that's a month away, you're going to be tempted to just say like, I'm just going to push through because like I feel like I can do 300 watts for, you know, X number of minutes. And that's when you start overreaching really bad. And that could ruin your entire season at that point, or even subsequent seasons. Like you can get into an overreach state really quick if your expectations are not aligned with your current reality.
Yeah. I also want to say that, you know, gaining your fitness back is not linear. And what I mean by that is that you'll gain a lot of fitness very quickly at the beginning, and then there will be a plateau. And that's just gaining fitness in general, but it also applies to gaining fitness back. So just to put some numbers to it, let's say you had a 300 watt FTP before you had to take a break, and then you took 2 months off, and now your FTP is 200. You know, it dropped 100 watts. Maybe in the first 2 weeks, you already get back to 250, but it's going to take you longer than another 2 weeks to get back to 300. Like it might take you a month or a month and a half to get back to 300. Like the like the first 50 watts is much easier to gain back than the next 50 watts.
Oh, it's the saying like the last 5% of everything is just as hard as the first 95% or something like that. Like something. Yeah.
It's definitely true in fitness. Like, you know, somebody who trains 15 hours a week to get a 300 watt FTP, if they train 30 hours a week, they won't have a 600 watt FTP, even though they are doing double the training.
Yeah.
Like they may like if they go from 15 hours a week to 30 hours a week, they double their training. They might only get another 20 watts out of that,
watts. Yeah.
Right? Like maybe they go from 300 to 320.
Sad sport. What a sad
like
sport.
there are diminishing returns with training and you know, doing so the last, I mean, you're right, the last 5%, the last 10%, whatever, is the hardest to achieve. You'll see a lot of gain immediately, and then, you know, to get that last 5%, you know, going from, you know, 285 or 290 back to 300, that'll be the hardest to get back.
You know what? This is a tangent. You know what's funny is we often think of fitness on a percent scale, but that's assuming that we're going to hit 100%. But in reality, we have no idea what 100% is. And we say like, oh, the last 5%, but it's like, who's to say I only have 5% left? Like maybe I'm nowhere, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like it almost doesn't even work for a percent scale. Like you might only ever make it to 98%. I feel like nobody, even the fastest in the world, is not at 100% of their potential. There's always room for growth one way or another. So like even thinking about it from a percent scale is kind of goofy.
Yeah.
Just a tangent though.
I think I agree with you, Drew, but I think when you're talking about getting back to your previous form, you could use a percent scale because you're at a percentage of your previous.
I guess I'm talking about potential.
Sure. Yeah.
I do know that the older you are in age, the quicker the decline is too. So for anyone out there listening, you know, use that as motivation to prevent the temptation to like take that extra couple weeks off just because, you know, like if you can return to training, it does benefit you to at least try and get to like some maintenance level sooner than later. Obviously, like you don't want to like rush back to things if it's an injury or an illness or something like that. But if it's just like, I had to take 3 weeks off because I had some family obligations, you know, or something like that, it's like, rather than saying, I'm going to push it out another week, or I'll get back to training next week. Like if you can, use that as motivation to get back sooner, because it's going to be a much longer road every single week you take off more.
Yeah. But also
young kids, you know, like if you're in your teens or early 20s, I mean, you could probably take a month off and get back to form in a week. Like it's crazy how like quick you can bounce back when you're younger.
Yeah. But
also, and also so
you have,
you have to keep that in mind too. Like a protocol that worked in your early 20s is not going to work in your early 40s. Like you have to adjust your return to training. Just because it worked well once doesn't mean you can do that same thing 10 or 20 years later.
But also your history of training. So let's just call it total training volume over your lifespan.
Yeah.
The
Training
bigger
age,
that
yeah.
is, the slower the decline. Is that
Sure.
right?
Yep.
You know, like if you have like a ton of miles in your legs over the last 10 years, it's gonna be a slower. You're not gonna like, I don't know, maybe because you have so much more room to play with. Like even if you do take a ton of time off, you're still gonna be pretty fit just because your baseline's so much higher.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
He does throw in the question about the sauna, but I don't know.
Go ahead, sauna man.
Oh no. Let's wrap it up. We don't need to go down I mean, how many times
I was just
have we
gonna
talked
give him
about
a
sauna?
quick little. I think it helped, but I don't think that was the only thing that helped.
Yeah.
I'm actually, because I did that VO2 testing, I think I'm gonna put out a video if I have time to, I don't know, walk through that. I think my lactate testing was actually a little bit more worth talking about than the VO2 numbers, but I think I'm going to do hopefully we'll do a YouTube video kind of walking through that lab test that I did a few weeks ago.
All right. So Patrick, stay tuned for that. All right. Sweet. Let's wrap it up. Thanks, guys. All right. We'll see you next week.
See ya.